Alright, what's going on? You ever gotten a traffic ticket? Or a fine from a code enforcement, or some BS from a housing authority, and you just paid it without a fight? You're getting played. Why? Because of quasi-judicial bodies. These courts, they're not really courts, and they rely on you not knowing your rights. I am sorry, I got the hiccup. Alright. These are administrative tribunals. They aren't part of any judicial branch, but they act like a court. I apologize. They issue fines, revoke license, and deny benefits with real consequences. But here's the key. They are still bound by due process and 14th Amendment. And that's where you'll win. Due process means notice and opportunity to be heard. Yes, but also proper procedures must be followed. Evidence must be presented. You must be allowed to confront it. And the decision maker must be neutral. If any of that breaks down, you have a procedural challenge. Alright? So, cut and dry. What is a quasi-judicial proceeding? Okay? There's some confusion, but we're going to get through all that today. Okay? Quasi-judicial proceedings are not full courts of law, but they look, sound, and often act like them. The term quasi literally means as if. These bodies function as if they were judicial, but they lack the full constitutional structure of a real court. They're not Article 3 constitutionally sound courts, okay? They're not courts of record. They're courts of no record, which means that the proceedings are not recorded. 1926 ex parte, in order for justice to be done, it must be seen. All right? These courts exist mainly in administrative and regulatory contexts. Traffic courts, housing boards, DMV hearings, license authorities, code enforcement hearings, and etc. They keep just go on forever. You're not always before a judge. Sometimes it's a hearing officer, an administrative law judge, or even a bureaucrat with authority granted by statute. Okay, and that's a little scary. You don't get a jury, and you don't get full due process. The rules of evidence are looser, and the burden of proof is lower, especially in civil infraction. These forms were created to be faster, cheaper alternatives to full-blown trials, but what they really became a way to expedite enforcement and collection. Often with reduced rights for the persons being summoned, these systems began expanding heavily in the early to mid-20th century as the federal and state governments created regulatory agencies, the IRS, EPA, OSHA, DOT, to enforce administrative rules. But it's important to remember they derive their power from legislative statutes, not the Constitution. Alright? And it is actually an issue because somewhere in the 20th century, 20th century, they blurred the lines between civil and criminal courts, leaving a vague ambiguity for full-on raping. Originally, in common law, criminal and civil law were totally separate. Different courts, different procedures, different standards. But in modern America, particularly after the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 1938 and the rise of administrative law, the line began to blur. Today, you can be in court over a civil infraction like speeding, where they call it not a crime, but still penalize you with fines, points, and license suspensions, or even loss of livelihood. That smells a lot like punishment to me, huh? In many quasi-judicial forums like code enforcement, they can fine you daily, lien your property, or seize your business, all without a jury and without a hearing, and with the hearing officer making the ruling based on hearsay or unverified reports. The fusion of civil and criminal consequences under administrative umbrella allows the state to bypass your constitutional protection. That's why it's so important to understand what kind of proceedings you're in. And never it's a casual situation just because it's labeled administrative. Okay? Very important. Very, very important. Okay? When you go to court, always ask the judge, what hat is he wearing and what hat is the court? And what you're asking is, are you a criminal judge, a civil judge, and is this a civil court or a criminal court? Because if you're in criminal court, then you're afforded criminal procedure. If you're in civil court, then you're afforded civil procedure. When you know the differences, you use that due process in your favor. Okay? They have to abide by due process. But they have to abide by it if you know about it. Alright? Now let's get a little tactical and get a little letter, a citation of something. It doesn't say you're being charged with a crime, but it's telling you you must show up or else. Welcome to quasi-judicial hell. And what do? Determine the jurisdiction's nature. Is it a civil infraction, administrative review, a licensing hearing? The rules change depending on the answer. Know what law or ordinance is being applied to you. Demand procedural clarity. Is this a civil, criminal, or administrative matter? What are the rules of evidence here? Am I entitled to counsel? You are putting them on notice. Know your fucking rights. Alright? Challenge standing in evidence. Force them to prove their claim. Ask for the first-hand witness, calibration records, chain of custody, or for a photo or citation. If they can't prove it, object to its inclusion. Lock them in the record. Everything you say or ask in a hearing may be transcribed. So use phrases like, let the record reflect, for the record I object to. You are building grounds for appeal if needed. Okay, always be prepared to appeal. Especially in courts of no record where you're not afforded a jury trial. Whereas, no matter what, if you're in a civil case over $20, you're afforded a jury trial. If you're in a criminal case, you're afforded a jury trial. Just not in administrative courts where you're afforded a bench trial. In a civil quasi-judicial setting, like a traffic ticket, code violation, and housing infraction, you're not on trial for a crime, but the state still acts like a prosecutor. The burden of is preponderance of evidence, meaning just more than 50%. That's dangerously low. The hearing officer will often assume the officer's report is truthful unless you challenge it. Your tactics: object to any unsworn statements. Ask if the witness, usually the officer, is present for cross-examination. Demand proof of calibration, signage, or proper jurisdiction. Use photos, maps, and public records to show error or lack of notice. Ask this golden question. Does the prosecution have any first-hand sworn witness that observed me violate this law at the time and place listed? That one question collapse. Oh, weak case. And remember, if they find you without proving the elements of the violation, you may have grounds to appeal in a real court. You know, didn't that ticket tell you how the officer caught you speeding? No. Well, where's the evidence? How did he come to this? If he tell you which one you can't, how can you summon the radar or the LiDAR to cross-examine it as a witness if he don't tell you which witness helped him create this issue? You know, right out the door, you need to scrutinize the citation or the notice. Tear that document apart, not physically, but verbally. Study it. Name, date, signatures, anything missing, wrong code or ordinance, time or location inconsistent, filed too late, beyond the statute limitations. How long ago was the crime? Was the civil matter? Okay. Did they fail to state the legal authority they're acting under? Even minor errors can render a citation void. That's not a loophole talk. That's Administrative Law 101. Okay? Look up procedural defects and validate administrative actions. Okay? It's supported by cases like Goldberg v. Kelly, citation 397, U.S. 254, 1970. The government must follow fair procedures when depriving someone of life, liberty, and property. Okay? Like I said, you need to find out exactly what court you're in. Are you in civil procedure or are you getting criminal procedure? Because the government must follow fair procedures when depriving someone of life, liberty, or property. Demand written record of procedure. Ask them right in. What administrative procedures were followed to initiate this action? If they can't produce that, you raise a due process challenge. You are required to provide procedural clarity. If you don't speak up, and you can't rebuttal unless you speak. Reference Amjur 2D Administrative Law, subsection 435. Failure to follow mandatory procedures renders the agency's action invalid. Evidence and the right to cross-examine. Many people get cited, show up, and never see a shred of evidence. You have a right to ask. What is the sworn affidavit? Where is it? Is there a chain of custody? Can I cross-examine the code officer, parking officer, or complainant? No live witness, no cross-examine. That's a violation, okay? C. Cleveland Board of Education versus Loudermilk, citation 470, U.S. 532, 1985. The opportunity to confront and rebuttal is a cornerstone of due process. Always cross-examine the officer. You know, if you cross-examine the officer, it gives you a chance to find flaws or issues with his memory. Okay? And then that's a huge thing. You know, object on the record. Always object to everything. If something is shady, say it clearly on the record. I object to this proceeding due to lack of foundational evidence. I object to administrative procedure not being properly followed. You know, follow the tribunal to answer, force the tribunal to answer, or they default into liability. Which means, if you don't say something and challenge it, it's automatic that you lost. You know, one thing they can't stand is an informed individual in their court. They can't stand it when you know something. Okay, so study. You know, especially in a court of no record. You know, most of these quasi-judicial bodies are governed by local ordinances and administrative code. If they say you violated a code, pull that code, read it, and see if their own process violates it. Many citations are invalid just based on procedural error. You know, something as simple as Utah 41 601 speeding, but there's 7 specific subsections where they can apply it. If they just give you the code, then how do you know how they applied it? If it's missing the subsection A through F, you can't definitively say, oh yeah, well, you know, this is my defense. You can't make a defense. So right there, motion to dismiss for lack of evidentiary. You can't create a defense. Then how are you going to be able to defend yourself in the court. I mean, you should always be able to have a defense. I mean, that's guaranteed. You know, most states have administrative procedures acts or sunshine laws requiring transparency and defined steps. You know, final word. You want to beat these kangaroo courts? Stop arguing emotion, stop begging, and start litigating. You know, demand evidence, demand procedure, demand record, demand a real hearing, and if they don't follow through, appeal. Don't argue with them, don't get emotional with them, just appeal. When you assert your due process rights with confidence and clarity, these fake judges start backing up real quick because they know if this goes to a real court, they'll lose. Use the law, use the system, and stop getting rolled by people who bet on your ignorance. You don't need to be a lawyer, you just need to learn to fight smart, due process is your sword, and you need to sharpen it. You know, some quasi-judicial settings impose criminal-like consequences, even if they're labeled as a violation of civil. Think failure to appear, multiple unpaid infraction, refusing to inspection or compliance. The danger is real. You could face a bench warrant, license suspension, contempt of court, incarceration in extreme cases. Your defense gets tighter. Ask, does the court recognize this as criminal or civil in nature? If they threaten jail or arrest, they say, then I assert my Sixth Amendment right to counsel and confront the witnesses. Demand that they read the complaint or citation into the record and ask, is there a verified signature of the complainant or injured party? If you're in a gray zone between administrative and criminal, force the court to commit. Is this criminal? If so, I want full due process. If not, you can't punish me like a damn crime, like a criminal. You know, I heard a judge in court one day, you know, looked at a guy that was in there for speeding 15 over, and he was like, you know, it's okay, buddy. We all make mistakes. It's just a traffic ticket. It happens to us all the time. Just pay the fine and be on your way. He was nonchalant about it until someone like me rolled up and said, no, I want to dismiss because of this and this, and then all of a sudden, you know, asshole. You know, oh, I need time to go over this, you know, and don't want to deal with it, and then, you know, want you to have to fight it out all the way to the end just because you dare to challenge. So when you dare to challenge, I assure you it's going to be a battle to the end because they can't stand someone like you and me that wants to fight. Quasi-judicial courts are the hidden workhorses of a modern state. They regulate everything from your driver's license to your home repairs, but they rely on your ignorance, your compliance, and your failure to object. You don't need to be a lawyer, but you do need to speak legal language, know the rules of the forum, preserve your rights, and force the other side to preserve every element. When you do that, you stop being a number and you become a formidable legal opponent, and they don't like you no more. And you know what it is. It's Zirconarian, another legal advocacy video. Stop listening to these sovereign citizens. Don't let them get you down. They're fucking stupid. You know, they're not stupid. My apologies on that. They're not stupid. They're using the wrong tactics in the wrong manner, and it's causing harm. We need to do better than that. You know, we need to work together to teach each other proper legalese so we can use our resources to fight for our freedoms. I do agree with sovereign citizens. We do have a right to free travel, and we should be able to travel down the road without issue. There shouldn't be no problems. But there's issue because unfortunately there's always going to be bad people, and the state's always going to want to regulate where there's bad people. So you know what it is. Like and subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. I want to know your opinion. Get up with me. If you'd like to know more about something, please don't hesitate to ask. I love studying and doing a deep dive into things. Stay up and stay out.